What's up, everyone? I'd like to thank you five for joining us here today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, whether you're watching live or Spotify or YouTube after the fact. We're excited to have a fun conversation on diversifying your product line. And we're going to start with some brief intros. Rick, you are first in line. Tell everybody who you are.
Hey, everybody. This is Rick Laxague with Craft Beverage Consultants. I'm a partner at a consulting firm, do sales, marketing, distribution, chain account, and a whole array of different things as well.
Appreciate you being here as always. Erik, you're up.
My name's Erik Fowler. I'm the Education and Brewery Experience Manager at White Labs. Kind of do a big catch-all of a lot of things, but really focus on customer engagement, marketing, and sales.
Thanks for chatting as always. Joe, welcome back. And you're in a new role than last time I spoke with you.
Yep. So I am a quality manager here at First Aid Brewing Company. We are actually opening our doors tomorrow during this pandemic, so wish us luck. But previously I worked at Dogfish Head running the sensory program there. So got a lot of background in diversifying beer styles, beer ingredients.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. And Tanner, I know we said it off air, but the last time you and I saw each other, along with Erik, was in Richmond at that craft beer and brewing workshop right before the sky fell down and the world got weird. So it's good to see you, and exciting things have been going on in your world. Can you tell everybody else a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm owner brewer at Knuckle Brewing. We're primarily focused on kombucha, but we recently expanded and got our own space and tap room, and we brought in beer, so I'm starting to brew some beers there as well. So it's been exciting.
And when did you open the tap room?
Mid-October. So we were open not even a month, and we got new COVID restrictions going on with no inside dining. So, we opened up and immediately have to start adjusting everything. So it's been fun.
I'm sure you're working hard.
Definitely.
No, Matt, always great to see you. Tell everybody who doesn't know a little bit about what you do in the world.
Sure. So Matt Albrecht, I own River Drive Cooperage and Millwork. We specialize in used cooperage and barrels, specializing in helping out the breweries combine the other ingredient of wood and oak to their brews. So not only do we just simply sell barrels, but we certainly take a consultative approach and work closely with brewers to really help work wood and oak into their recipes as an ingredient. So barrels, alternatives, cubes, chips, you name it. But it really helps to kind of take a number of beers to a whole new level.
And have you seen quite a bit of breweries become more interested in barrel aging through the pandemic?
It's been kind of, yes, is the quick answer. When everything first started, winter was just winding down, and a lot of breweries still had their heavy winter beers that weren't selling, and they knew they weren't going to sell them through the summer. And a lot of people took those and decided to add them to oak and age them all summer, hoping that they would then have, a different product come this time of year. That's worked out pretty well for a number of people. And then it's also given some people some downtime to really get creative. We've been doing everything they can to work with everyone through the pandemic to keep the creativity spinning, and hopefully when we come out of this and people are up back full bore, there've been a lot of great ideas and a lot of cool products to take to market.
No, I'm definitely excited to see what comes out of it, the pandemic, not just the barrel side, but all the innovations that's taking place right now. It's been fascinating to watch. Now, Erik and Tanner, I like to kind of start with a question targeted at both of you, because White Labs, has been in the industry 25 years, but you just recently launched your own brewery, and now you're canning it as well. And Erik, correct me if I'm wrong, but did that start during the pandemic?
Yeah, we've had a brewery for going on 6+ years now. But yeah, we started moving to 4-packs as a packaging format during all this. But to Matt's point, it's kind of funny hearing you say that, because we, as well as our brewery, is a little bit different because it's more of an R&D brewery. We're looking at comparing 2 different yeast strains side by side and showing what that does, and updating our catalog with information and fermentation kinetics based off of that. But we initially had that conversation where we had a lot in tanks, and it's like, what are we going to do with this? Let's can. And then, ends up that you're not, at least in our case, we're not going to can something that's been sitting in tank for a long time anyways. So you just have to rebrew it anyways, which is kind of the same problem. But those channels have been unique and interesting, a kind of a fun way of getting our messaging and branding out there. to promote the east side of things.
No, it's an exciting project, and it's cool from the brewing standpoint, but also the marketing standpoint for the consumers to have the opportunity to try the same beer with different yeast strains. Super neat there. Now, Tanner, you definitely just opened during the pandemic. You said October you launched your tap room. Now, when you and I first met, you were just brewing the kombucha with goals of starting the brewing side. What made you want to add beer into the mix?
So, yeah, we wanted a tap room. We knew that from the beginning, but our location, a little bit rural. It's not really the best spot for a kombucha only tap room. Our area is a little bit more blue collar, and there's no breweries around. So, yeah, we just wanted to attract people in with the beer, and at the same time be able to teach them about kombucha, because it's still a relatively new thing. It's not too mainstream. So just wanted to bring in some education as well.
So before you opened the tap room, was your kombucha sold in just your typical channels, or did you have a small tap room at any point in the past, or how were you getting it to the consumer?
Yeah, we were at a commissary. We actually had a couple different ones. We just kind of outgrew them. So we've always sold in kegs. Then we started canning as well. We just have an October, single can Cena, and rocking through those. So yeah, it's been an investment. So.
Now, and since launching the tap room, what's the split between kombucha versus beer?
In sales, beer is way ahead of the kombucha, but our kombucha has to ferment for a month. So we're just now kind of starting our first batches of kombucha out of the new place. Taproom sales is probably 90% beer, 10% kombucha. So it's a significant difference.
But when you look off premise, are you seeing your kombucha selling more so in the other channels?
Yeah, it's starting to get a little busier, starting to pick up some new accounts. Yeah, definitely. I don't have any plans of distributing beer. It's going to be taproom sales only.
When you guys are looking at your taproom sales and those percentages, is there a big difference in cost of goods to produce kombucha compared to beer? Are your margins a lot better on one or the other?
The margins are definitely better on the kombucha side. The difference is the amount of time it takes to make the final product. We're looking at a month of fermentation before it even goes into bright, so it's considerably longer for kombucha.
No, very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. No, Rick, you're an expert in looking at the market as a whole. I know you love your data, but looking at businesses right now that are deciding to diversify, what are some things a business should consider, whether brewery, kombucha, any fermented malt beverage? What are some of the criteria that makes for a good business that should diversify at this point in time?
I think it's your tasting room consumers when they're coming in, seeing what they're looking for, asking them how they're staying. So you've got to asking them good questions while they're there, staying, having events, and drinking whenever they can. I think if people want it, it's make it. I think about a year ago, a lot of breweries were still like, "Oh, I'm not going to make a seltzer. I'm not going to get onto that craze." And now I encourage people to think of it as another style of beer when they're doing that and having it for their tasting room. I'm not saying you need to spend thousands of dollars on packaging and go out and try to take shelf space from White Claw and Truly. I'm just saying that you need to make sure that you're offering everything. If it's an alcoholic beverage and within your liquor license you can produce that, you should try to offer that to the consumer, be it kombucha, be it seltzer, whatever that is, even if it's a gluten-free beer, if you want to try to do something different like that, to offer that, or a cider in some instances. I've got some friends that own a brewery here in Columbia, Missouri, and they opened up a separate location, a cider brand called the Waves of Cider, and they're also doing their barrel aging stuff over there with their funk and all that, so that way it doesn't affect the brand Logboat Brewing Company at their brewery. So just being diversified in what you can do, and look at your state laws. I just read an article today. Kentucky just passed a bill where you can ship direct to consumers, breweries, wineries, distilleries, anyone that makes an alcoholic beverage. It's 9 states they can ship to. But I was like, I looked to see if Missouri was one, and it's not. But Arizona is, so maybe I'll have my brother try to order some stuff from Braxton, and that's who published the article, who shared it and stuff. Evan and Greg, those guys over there, and There's a lot of whatever diversification you can do to get revenue to come in and show some positive growth. And at the same time, like Erik's question was about the margin, some of these new ones that you can diversify in are highly profitable from a margin perspective, and a cost of goods. So it's something to think about from your overall business model.
And I think you gave a really good example just now about Braxton, because they've diversified quite a bit themselves. I think the ad that they put out earlier this year for their pumpkin spice seltzer,
amazing.
It was a very good ad. I wish I had it ready to pull up right now.
Yeah.
But they're a brewery with multiple tap rooms that launched a pumpkin spice seltzer because that's selling right now.
Yeah, I saw that, and it was about over a year ago. I was in Cincinnati, had some meetings with some breweries there, and I met up with Evan and went to the brewery, tried everything, and I had the Vibe seltzer at the time. Maybe it was about March will be 2 years now. So, and I thought it was at the time the best seltzer that I had tried. It was hands down and really, really good. And that pumpkin spice, I'm like, seriously? And when it came out, I'm like, all of a sudden, it came out the ad at summertime, and it was like people were excited. The comments were out of control with it. So good.
Yeah, it got a lot of buzz.
I can add in a little bit there. Coming from a brewery that has put everything from lobsters to pumpkins to you name it in beer, definitely see how people can introduce ingredients into their beers too to introduce some of this variety. I think the main takeaway along with this like diversification is you need to be like authentic to yourself, authentic to your brewery. You don't want to try to do something just to chase a trend, because oftentimes when you chase that trend, you're already well far behind it. So you're going to throw all this money into maybe new equipment, new ingredients, potentially mess things up in your process. And if it's not something that you'd want to make anyway, then it could potentially cause problems, especially with like very specific, like trendy styles of beer. Like, oh, we're going to throw cake or something into the mash tun. If you're not going to do that anyway, I wouldn't recommend it, just because it will cause problems for your business as a whole otherwise. So I think it's just important to keep in mind your like authentic brewery mission, purpose, things like that.
No, I think that's very true. And, a decade ago, the battle was between, small craft brewers and all big beer. And now you see the debates between people who are brewing seltzer and then those who don't want to do seltzer. So I think it's really important to stay true to what you're doing. And, if seltzer is not the right thing for your portfolio, don't add it. But if you can throw it in, and your consumers are going to love it, I definitely think it's a great idea.
Well, you see a lot of side brands to do that, right? Like you're launching another sub brand that kind of encompasses that distances the failures or success of that with, I think, your core lineup, because you kind of look at like the beer stats of the world that do one thing really well. If they launched a seltzer, people would kind of bat an eye, but then you have, your McKellar San Diego that does a new beer once a week, right? And cake in the mash tun. Yeah, that sounds fun. That's the true meaning of butter beer.
Yep.
I saw a brewery that just did some donuts. They had 10 dozen donuts, cake donuts they threw in the mash, and I was like, oh, okay. We'll see.
The weird ingredients, that's definitely another way people are diversifying. So diversification is not just doing a new product. Joe, like you mentioned, at your former employer, Dogfish Head, how have they used, and looking at your career, how have ingredients been a way to diversify for yourself?
Can you repeat that one more time?
How have ingredients and just diversifying what you put in the product been a way you've been able to successfully diversify from both your companies?
Yeah, I think a great way that a lot of people do it are variants. You see this all the time, especially with like your big imperial stouts. People will add different variants to make different vintages. And that creates success because it's kind of like people want to get them all. They want to check off that list of, okay, I've tried the base. Now I've tried the cherry imperial, the vanilla imperial. So people have had success that way. I think playing off a lot of like basic, just like good practices, culinary principles is a big one. That if you follow culinary principles, make the right choices, you're probably going to make a pretty good beer. Whereas if you try to throw things together that aren't necessarily cohesive, if you wouldn't eat it on its own, or you wouldn't taste it on its own, I don't think you should expect for it to make a good beer as well. So I think use the resources you have, scale things down. Small batches are a great idea. If you're really not sure how something's going to go or how it's going to sell, R&D it. You could do A/B style testing or even more. Like I know you're doing a lot of that at White Labs. Brew a base beer, and if it's a yeast or if it's a very special ingredient that you're adding cold side or even hot side, if you have the ability, and just track how they're doing, collect the data. All that data is good free data that you can use to make decisions to make an even better beer.
What lineup?
Yeah, I'd love to go a little bit deeper into that. Erik, go ahead first.
Sorry, what lineup are you? So Tanner, you too. Like, what lineup are you guys opening with? Right? Is it are the days of a blonde ale, a porter, an IPA, and a pale ale over? Like, what was your guys' approach to opening?
So
that was pretty much our exact lineup. So it's kind of funny. We don't have any pastry stouts or any New Englands on our starting tap list. So we're just pales, cream ale, amber ale, just kegged a stout this morning, and an IPA.
And we, of course, we started with a porter. It was a good way for us to test our equipment, see how it came out. But we're a little more Belgian focused too. So we have like 25% hop forward beer. So standard IPA. We have a few hazies on. We have a Belgian triple on, a wit beer. And then we did make a Goza toward the end of it because we wanted to introduce a sour, because I think there's a very specific percentage of beer drinkers that gravitate toward sours. But we also don't have the infrastructure or even the time right now to make a full-fledged sour. So we're going to slowly tiptoe in by trying these classic beer styles that bring those characteristics that people like. And then we introduced, in that one, we introduced some fruit to it. It's not your thick, slushy, fruited sours, but it is a Goza aged on bergamot and mango. So it does bring a little of that fruit in without kind of, for us, compromising what our vision for our brand is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, this isn't a dig at your guys' lineup at all. When we were doing that brewery workshop that Andrew was talking about, somebody that was a brewery in planning was, I think it was that one, where they said, we're gonna open an all Belgian brewery and it's gonna be great. And it was an exercise where you had like your team of experts all kind of rate the pitch. And so, somebody asked like, why Belgian beers? And they said, well, nobody around me is doing Belgian beers. So I said, well, why don't you go and ask the bars that you're going to sell to what they sell? And it's probably not.
I remember you asking that question.
A lot of Belgian beers. And the point I'm trying to make is diversifying. You guys probably put a lot more thought into who you are and your brand identity and how you're going to stick with that long term. But sometimes I hear a lot from people trying to pivot very quickly or making drastic moves, not really keeping the consumer in mind and just trying to, like I said, chase whatever's the next best thing. And it's not necessarily true to them. So I thought it was kind of a funny exercise to hear something. I'm going to do the one thing that nobody else is doing. And it's like, well, everybody's going to say IPA is what sells. Like, as much as we like it or don't like it, that's going to be the answer.
Yeah, I mean, IPAs, the data is ridiculous in dollar sales behind that. It's like the number 2 style category is like 2/3 less dollar volume sales versus IPA, right? So when you're thinking about that, and then going back to like what Joe's talking about the stouts, I have a client, Epic Brewing Company out of Denver. It's their this is their time of year. They did their variant release of Big Bad Baptist. This year, 2020, there was a double chocolate peanut butter cup. There was pecan pie, chocolate raspberry, bigger batter Baptista, which was a Big Bad Baptist with Mexican coffee aged in mezcal barrels. So that's pretty cool. And then they did their sextuplet, which is, is a little bit of a Solera. And then this is the 6th anniversary of the variant series coming out from them and doing that. And there are 5 releases they do annually. And, to see they used rum barrels, mezcal barrels, bourbon barrels. They did a lot of different barrels. And this year they actually added a flash pasteurizer because, Matt, you can speak to this, and those that know science, Erik and Matt, and everyone probably on here. It's like when you have barrel-aged beers and you're trying to blend and you're trying to do stuff, you're going to have some that get diacetyl. When I was at Green Flash, we had that when we first launched Cellar 3 with Silva Stout that happened. Goose Island had it a few years ago with Bourbon County Stout, right? And people lit them up. But, I mean, it happens. So there's steps and protocols you got to put into place. And I just wanted to give Matt an opportunity, like great talking about barrels and how that can diversify your portfolio, but then also knowing, I'm sure Erik and Joe, you can give some insight. And if you're going to do that, you've got to make sure you have the technical specs and the wherewithal to execute that, right? Or you're going to run into some of those things. And some of it is just unavoidable. And it's hard, but anyhow, I just wanted to bring that conversation up.
I try to explain it all the time, putting a bad beer into a good barrel does not make a good beer. And I try and, and even, regardless of what your core lineup is, that's what you're good at. Get good at what you're good at and then play from there. And it's kind of like with Erik, you're making probably the same beer, but with a bunch of different types of yeast. Same idea. You get really good at a beer and then play with your different adjuncts in your barrel and barrels and stuff like that. And that really, some of the most popular and best-selling barrel-aged beers out there are either are unchanged for years. I think of Allagash Curio. I think all they did was, and I don't mean all they did, but they took their triple ale, which was a great Belgian beer that they knew how to make really well, and they put it into fresh bourbon barrels. And so but it's now another label. It's another beer. And to be honest, makes a lot more money. The investment, and I teach this all the time, but that the investment pays off between 500 to 1,000% just by putting it in that barrel. And it also obviously adds a lot of complexity to the beer that makes it, brings that much more value to the table. And then the other beers that we see that do really well are the beers that, and Rick mentioned the variants that Epic does, that idea where every year it's a little bit different. So it's the same idea, but they switched up just a little bit. We've got a brewer who works with us twice a year on, it's the same exact beer every year. They age it in 4 separate barrels. So each barrel is different and they blend. And every year, one of those barrels changes. So, it's a port barrel, a brandy barrel, a bourbon barrel, and a gin barrel. And then the next year they do all, 3 of the same barrels, but they swap one of them out for, a maple syrup barrel or whatever. So, they get good at what they're good at, and then they use the adjuncts from there, because a great barrel doesn't make a great beer unless the beer's good itself.
No, that's a great point, Matt. I know you love talking about using oak as an ingredient. We've talked about a lot of these variants where you throw in different, peanut butter, raspberries, whatever it may be. What are the 5-year thoughts on, not only the value in adding that to the product, because it's going to make for a unique product, but the sellability of the product in the market? When you add something that people are aware of, or they have the allure that it's bourbon barrel aged, or now has cherries on it. How does that increase the sellability of the product?
I'll answer that real quick from my angle, just because I already have all the numbers done. But you think of an average of and all my math is based off of a 750 milliliter bottle, and my math is based off a number of surveys that I did of a number of breweries. So you take a 750 milliliter bottle that is going to sell for, say, an average of $10 a bottle of a beer that you make, and you do it really well. Now you invest an average of, let's say, call it $200 into a barrel, a bourbon barrel. You've got, say, $200 invested in it, all in, and you take that beer that you already know how to do, and you put it into that barrel, and you let it sit for a matter of days, a matter of weeks, a matter of months, whatever your expertise tells you it's ready, and then you take it out. That investment works out, and you end up with 200 and some odd 750 milliliter bottles out of that 53 gallons of barrels. But at the end of the day, what we've seen is breweries are able to justify an additional value of $5 to $10 for that 750 milliliter bottle of beer. So you now have what was a $9.99 bottle that's now $15 or $20, and some even more. All because of that $200 barrel. And what that works out to is an additional $500 to $1,000 in profit. So because you spent $200 on that barrel, it's an investment, and some investments come with risks. But if everything goes well, you end up with between $500 to $1,200 payoff just by doing that small investment, which is much better than the stock market. Trust me.
No, Tanner, I like to kind of look at your product line because you've just recently opened, with the kombucha and the beer. I know you let me try one of your delicious kombuchas back in Richmond, but how often do you play with the ingredients you put in? And have you found that, putting in certain fruit or ingredients has made the beer more sellable even before the customer tried it just because of the allure of that ingredient?
Yeah, from the kombucha side, definitely I'm always trying to come up with seasonals or tweaking recipes. We don't stick with the same exact recipe too long. I'm always trying to improve it. We started doing some, I call them kombucha rattlers. So we're mixing a wheat beer or a cream ale with kombucha and selling them that way. And it's hard to put on a menu to explain it, but once people understand it, it's become a pretty good seller.
Now, looking at the kind of breweries that are diving into more diversified portfolios right now, Rick, I think you'll have some pretty good insight on this one. Are you seeing more smaller breweries do this, or is it becoming they more risk adverse, and we're seeing larger brands who have a lot of shelf space take the dive into getting these unique new products on the shelves? Is there, an ideal look for a brewery looking to diversify their portfolio?
Well, I think it goes with your business model and what you can, how far you can reach, and what it is, the expectation of what that diversification, be it a seltzer, cider, kombucha, NA, barrel-aged beer, whatever it is you want to do, and how much you can produce. Overall, you got to look at your production schedule. Does it fit? Do you have the team that can execute that from a production standpoint? Do you have access to the raw ingredients to be able to do that? And then can you invest that time? Matt's talking about the investment into barrels, right? And then there could be other things that you need to invest into as well. Like, as we talked before this meeting got started, we talked a little bit about NA beers. You have some money to buy a dealkalizer, or are you going to have someone make that for you? So I think you got to look at your business model. There's a small local brewery that's been open a little over 2 years now here in Springfield, Missouri, about an hour away from where I live. And their first beer that they rolled out into package was, well, let me rephrase that. Their first package to retail was actually their seltzer. They didn't even put out any of their beers first. They went like 4 months with their seltzers because no one else in the state was making a local seltzer. So they did that. Now they started releasing their beers. So for them, it was they felt at the time the juice was worth the squeeze to roll out their seltzer and get that out there and kind of get a little bit of market share from a local perspective that's making a hard seltzer versus the big mass breweries. Thinking about probably one of the best examples of diversification, who has the wherewithal, is smart, technical, and the team can pull it off, is Maui Brewing Company. Garrett Marrero and his team over there are phenomenal. Kim and everybody that's over there, even their CFO and stuff, they look at it from a business. Can we afford to do this? Risk versus reward. What's the payoff going to be? Beer. They did non-alcoholic sodas, doing coffee, canned non-alcoholic coffee. They have spirits now. Now they're doing seltzers. So they do a lot of things, and it wouldn't put it past me if, I don't know if Garrett hears or will listen to this, that he comes out with an NA in a year or so, because he does everything else there, and it's all made there, on Maui, and how much of it's sold there is remarkable versus what comes into the mainland. But he's diversified very well. And, I also, friends with the owner. When I was at a distributor, I worked with them. They were one of my suppliers, but Grand Canyon Brewing Company out of Flagstaff or Williams, Arizona. They started out just a brew pub restaurant, and then now they're doing spirits as well. There's a lot of breweries that are doing it. So again, like I mentioned earlier, what can you apply for and you can get is from the liquor law perspective, what can you and can you not do in the same premise? Look into that from the legalities. There's the financial, there's the team, the culture that you've got to have, the manpower, and then you've got to have the sales and the marketing. That's the biggest thing. It's like, there's I was talking with a friend who's a sales director at a brewery, and he's like, our beers, our hoppy beers just don't sell outside of our home market because they're these weird names or stuff, because it's what the brewers want to make and that's what they want to do. I'm like, oh, I think you need to put your foot down as a sales director and you're trying to sell beer out of the state. You got to tell them, guys, you can't just brew, we can't just package and do what you want to do. We've got to change some stuff, and you've got to look at that. That's where tap into resources like a Matt, find another vendor partner you can do something with. White Labs, your yeast people, ask them about doing some different stuff and helping out with potentially testing and things like that. But you gotta be smart about it. Just don't go and do it to chase trends or to compete with the guy zip code away. It's just not worth it.
You made an interesting point midway through. You talked about your client who was 4 months in, released a seltzer to market before they did any of their beers because they wanted to be that regional seltzer brand. And, when we all think seltzer, I imagine most folks are thinking just the larger companies that are putting out seltzer right now. Do you predict an emergence of regional seltzer brands that kind of take up some market share from the big guys who are putting out their product these days?
I think so. It'll be region by region. I don't necessarily think that you're going to find someone that's going to put out a seltzer and expect to take share outside of their home market. Like I'll go back to Braxton when they launched Vibe, their seltzer, talking with them about the pull through they were getting and the volume. It was taken away. Sales were and some facings were getting cut from Truly and White Claw and those brands at that point. It was, and then thinking about other seltzers is, look at what Quirk's done with Boulevard, what they've done with that brand. It's pretty big. I mentioned Maui doing his seltzers as well. And I think that if you're going to do it, just know your reach and how far you can get it and what your expectation is. Don't think that you're going to have 20,000 barrels of volume in a seltzer to replace your IPA that's down, right? Because everyone else has a new IPA that's out there. You got to have good, clear expectations. I mean, Scofflaw is another one that did great with seltzer launching, and they actually, I think this year are going to do like 20,000 barrels of seltzer. That's a lot. So in that market down in Atlanta, it's taken, market share from the big ones.
It's interesting to see the trends. It's going to be more so interesting to follow them over the next few years. With regard to the current state of the world right now, I mean, we all think craft beer. We think the community that we all know and love is actually sharing a beer with someone in a tap room. And that's not something that really exists in the normal capacity right now. And a huge part of diversifying for smaller brands is really that educational component. Whether we're talking seltzer, kombucha, whatever it may be, how have you five seen breweries and companies properly educate about new products during a pandemic?
I've seen a lot of these virtual type classes, and I think they've been received pretty well. I've seen breweries who say, okay, swing by the brewery, pick up a mixed 6-pack, and then at 6 p.m. on Zoom, we're going to do a guided tasting. I think there's some potential in that. It won't replace the experience whatsoever of being in the tap room, hanging out with friends, but I have seen a lot of breweries locally try for that kind of education. I've also seen outside of beer, especially in the cheese world. I've seen a lot of big cheese companies providing flights of cheese that you pick up, and then you do have that same kind of experiential night, except it just happens to be over a video camera instead of sitting in front of the cheesemonger as they describe the specific cheeses to you.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on that, and before touching on the engagement part, we keep talking about diversifying your brand to these extreme beer styles for the most part, which Joe's probably sick of hearing after leaving Dogfish Head. No, I don't want to brew something that's 30 Plato anymore. But you have examples like Firestone Walker, and this is a couple years ago, but 805 has completely changed who that company is. And it's changed that category in general of those light blonde Pilsner type beers. So, I would stress to people, don't always look so outside of your comfort zone, but maybe look at filling a market segment that's not there and do it well and at a competitive price point.
Great point. I think you always wanted to get people, what was the gateway beer to get you from premium or imports into craft beer, right? What was your gateway people talk about? And I think still having those styles to get people to attract, right? You still want to take market share from, the big companies, Miller, Coors, Anheuser-Busch, right? The light beer drinkers, premium light. So offering that, again, is smart to have a golden ale or a lager, if you will, or something, or even as simple as a classic German style Weiss beer, having something simple to attract people to feel comfortable. You gotta have that and think about that for your diversification. It's a good point.
Something that I've tried, we're obviously, generally I spend all year traveling around to all the trade shows and all the events and all these in-person conferences, which is when I normally get to hang out with Rick, except I haven't seen the guy in like a year and a half because of all this. But so now we've saved a considerable amount of money by not doing that. So in our marketing budget. So what I've done, with the brewer being my customer, and obviously the brewer can take this towards their customers, but I've invested that money on increasing the customer experience in any way that is, and whether that's swag or, I've got right next to me a stack of cards, and I just sit here when I see something cool come across the Facebook or the internet that's to do with the brewery, I'll pull a card out and I'll write that brewery a card and I'll put it in the mail to them. Just really anything to just, in this world of the unknown that we're in of 2020, just to increase that customer experience in any way I can. That's what I've been trying, and I'll explain to you something that I fell for pivot-wise. So I right in front of me, I've actually got this can, and we'll do a free plug for them. Why not? But Hoplark, it's actually located right out of Colorado. Essentially, it's a tea company. They're making tea, and but they're using hops. So they're brewing tea like they would brew beer, but it's completely non-alcoholic. But it has the taste of hops in it. So they're able to ship it anywhere in the world, essentially. There's no liquor laws that is around it. Some of them have caffeine, some of them don't. There you go. All right. Yep. So I've bought like 3 separate cases or 4 cases of this product from them, which is honestly almost more beer than I purchased from one specific brewery. But I bought this because I can have it in the middle of the day. They can ship it to me. It's easy to get, and it has that nice crisp, bubbly hop flavor where it's like a beer, but not. And I definitely got sucked right into that one, and I bought a couple cases. So, but it worked.
That brings up something else that I wanted to touch on in regards to the virtual experiences and stuff too. Is most core beers, the non-barrel aged stuff, it's pretty cost prohibitive to ship. And so when you look at wine, people are used to paying a premium for it. So if you're paying $35 to $50 to ship a case of wine, well, the value of that wine's a couple $100, so it doesn't feel like that bad of a deal. But a case of beer, if the case of beer is $60, paying $35 to ship it is really extreme, and so that's very hard for people to do. So I know we've as an industry been talking a lot. California in particular has been pretty lenient about, usually you're required to charge as much. You're supposed to essentially cover your shipping costs when you're shipping beer. You can't give shipping away for free as a way to incentivize the purchase, and they've kind of waived that. So I've ordered the first beer I've ever ordered online, and that was from Sierra Nevada, because they had mixed 12 packs of vintage Bigfoot for $35 with free shipping if you spent over $70. So, right. And that was going back to, it was 2010 to 2020 or 2011 vintage to 2020. So
Erik, I ordered the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's awesome. But I know that they're not making a lot of money on that. Right. We have great shipping rates as a company that ships around the world. I know what the cost of shipping is on a lot of that. And it's very difficult to get that as a business model. So even looking at your tea, imagine, right on. I imagine that the cost on that's pretty high, which raises the per can from $4, which is something you'd probably normally be willing to pay, to $6 a can, which starts getting up there.
But Erik, I want to follow up with that because when I ordered the Sierra Nevada barley wine, it came in a fantastic box, and I got to give them a lot of credit. The way they packaged that was absolutely amazing. They did a really killer job with that. But also at the top of the package was a little note saying, hey, come and enjoy this with us at a virtual tasting. So I signed up for a virtual tasting at a website. I went online, booked it, and then a few nights later, I got to enjoy those 4 barley wines. I shared with a friend. I couldn't drink 4 different barley wines at once. That'd be way too much. But, they walked me through each and every one of them, and that was a fantastic experience. While we talk about diversifying, pushing some different products out there, like your barley wine that you're not typically drinking, but positioning it in an appealing way, that's arguably diversifying in itself, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's, I've tended to find that creating some form of engagement with those types of tastings is the best received. It's often that you talk at people. Fortunately, something like this panel, like listen to it on the go or whatever makes sense. But most people, when you're tasting beer, you want some engagement. You want somebody to ask you, what do you think of it? And you don't want to have to type it, right? So, usually for a lot of stuff that we do, it'll be through a webcast, which is more this format. But when it comes to our brewery side, I'll actually just throw it up on Zoom and see people's faces and, let them almost lead the content of the event.
Yeah, talking about the this engagement through this platform and stuff, and we're talking about from a consumer standpoint, like you just talked about from the Sierra Nevada Bigfoot program. But also, you got to think about if you're a production brewery and you're selling through a distributor, you've had to do your annual ABP meetings this way. I have a client in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They launched the state of Kansas, and no ride whisks, no market visits and stuff. So, and their salespeople, they're actually not doing remote. They're doing meetings remote as well. They're not having them come into the office and do stuff. If you don't need to, don't come in. So we actually did a thing where we set up a virtual tour and a tasting through with the sales team, that's going to be out there selling the beer, the on-premise and liquor store independent channel, where they all logged into Zoom, took the camera around and showed them the brewery and did stuff like that from your distributor standpoint. Now, I know there's a lot of cool stuff they've been doing for consumers and people like that too, but I think, if you're out there, you need to think about offering that, and like, how do you get share of mind with your distributor right now? Offer that up, and to be able to talk about that as well, to get them excited about selling it, right? Because if you're going through distribution, you're not selling it at your door, or direct to consumer or retail self-distributing, you've got to utilize your partners. So use the technology.
No, I definitely agree to that, Rick. Now, to go back to the educational and engagement component for a minute, in a past world, if you launched a new kombucha in your tap room, Tanner, it was a little bit easier when someone came in to buy a beer, and my wife doesn't like beer. You can easily encourage the kombucha on her. That's a great way for exposure. And the current state of things, we don't find people going to breweries for events as much as before. And in the past world, you would go just because there was something going on there, and it would just happen to be an event, but it was at a brewery. And now brewery visits are becoming more intentional. And Erik, we talked a little bit about engaging virtually these days. And Rick, you talked about engaging with your sales team. But how can we reach out to a new consumer who doesn't even know about our products, let alone the new product we're launching to market? Like, let's say you're a brewery owner, you're putting out your new kombucha, Tanner. There's people who aren't going to breweries right now. How are you letting people know about your products, and how can you engage with new markets when you're not having that face time?
And we're doing a lot more like Facebook marketing, trying to introduce people that way. And we've gotten so many more followers since we opened up the beer tap room than we had in the last 2 or 3 years that we were solely kombucha. So that's been a big help. Outside of that, it's just the COVID restrictions in Colorado right now are just no inside consumption. So we still have a patio. And we have an outside bar that we're able to kind of talk to. And so we still have some in-person education, obviously less than before.
Yeah, I think. Whoa, feedback. Trying to target, like Tanner said, through Facebook, that target marketing where you can, if you're not a beer drinker, but you're on Facebook or whatever social platform where you can geo-target, you can have that information, and you can hire a marketing person, some do SEO and all that type of stuff, and look at that and invest that way is a good way to do it, especially in the digital world today that people are in front of screens a lot more than they ever have been. And since, print, it really isn't in a budget, but this is the way that you could spend, anywhere from $10 on Facebook to even $100. How many boost impressions that can get you. Maybe reaching out to, I just had a client, and she spoke yesterday, Tara Nurin, with you, Andrew. She's a member of Craft Beverage Consultants, and we shared a client. There's that feedback again. I don't know who that is. Where, contacting some of the influencers that are in industries in certain hot zones, right? If there's a blogger in Tanner's specific marketplace or in Joe's or whatnot that you can reach out to, send them kind of like a press packet, here's who we are, reach out to them and utilize what you can, right? Offer them, whenever you can travel comfortably and we can do this and come to our production facility. We would love to, host you and stuff like that. So really think about, again, who your audience is and how you can reach other people than your normal audience.
And to give Tara a little credit real quick, she's so awesome at talking about how breweries and businesses can use the media for free to help get your brand out there. So get to know any single person who could help get you in front of new audiences. And your writers, beer writers, reporters, they're great people to build relationships with. And Matt, I think you had something you wanted to add?
I was going to say, the customer experience, really just turning that, right on its head of what it normally is. And there's a brewery that is local to me that they're a good brewery. They're great people. But any normal given winter would have no plan to go there and go drink their beer, just because that's just how my schedule normally works out. But because of COVID and also because we're in Maine, so we can kind of play into it a little bit more, they filled their entire parking lot with igloos. So you can go there and you can sit in your own private igloo with your own friends and drink their beer. And all of a sudden, I went from, what do I need to go there for, to, I want to go drink beer in an igloo. So, it's really, they're kind of really playing on it and doing a great job, just doing what they can with what they have.
I 100% agree with that. I think people are willing to maybe spend a little bit more money or go out of their comfort zone and go to an event or make time for it if it is this experience. Like, people, when they go to breweries, I think that's kind of the part that's missing with takeout beer. They're not just buying the beer, they're buying part of the experience. You're sitting where the beer is made with people who are maybe involved with the brewing process. So anything that you can do to make it more of an experience in a time when experiences have kind of been stolen from a lot of people is a great way to draw a bigger audience in.
And Joe, when I think, the taproom experience, I often use the word differentiating to kind of stand out, but it's also diversifying as well. Putting unique aspects in there, it definitely fits that criteria. With regard to First State, which is opening tomorrow, what are some of the ways you plan to diversify and kind of stand out in the market?
Yeah. So our big thing is a very curated experience. So we're a brewery first, but we have an amazing kitchen with an amazing chef who's going to pair our foods with that beer. So when you come in, we're hoping that you're not just going to be here for a beer, but maybe you'll stop in for dinner because you're more willing to sit somewhere for 2 hours. That's your outing for the week. Instead of going out every night, you consciously say, okay, I'm going to do everything right. Go to First Date, grab dinner, and I know I'm going to have this awesome experience where the food menu was designed around the beer, vice versa. We have all of our staff trained up, so they're beer experts and able to answer all their questions. So kind of prepping for opening, knowing that it's going to be hard to get people in the door, but if you give them a very specific, very curated, very detailed, down to, we were just talking about it the other day, the whole experience, down to the way the parking lot looks, to the way it smells in the brewery, is a very curated experience because we want people to say, wow, these guys thought of everything. We want to come back. We want to spend our time here just because it was such a great experience.
So be Sierra Nevada is the point of this whole conversation.
All right.
It's awesome to hear you say that, though, because I think, I've seen a lot of breweries open up that haven't even viewed themselves the way that you're speaking about that brewery before opening.
A lot
so
of thought, maybe
that's
too much
awesome.
thought. But yeah, most breweries that are popping up are breweries in like industrial complexes. You got your door that you open up in the summer and maybe play some cornhole. Whereas we're trying to get that very specific, curated like experience, and we don't have anything like it in town right now. So we're not just a brewery in the area doing it. We're kind of opening up the first venue doing this kind of thing in the area too.
I want to know, how did for First State, it's like, how is that name not taken already for a brewery? It's like, who, it's
from what I understand,
that he's been 5 years in planning that it wasn't taken before. It's like, that's pretty smart. I like it.
He's a really smart guy. He's on his game. I think it took him a long time to lock that name down, but he locked it down. And it's a great name. We're the First State Delaware First State Brewery, so it works.
No, I love it. Now, looking back in the last 10 years of the industry, 10 years ago, you first had to make a pretty good beer to be successful. Then you had to have a pretty good experience. And COVID's taught us you have to have a COVID-friendly experience. Is the next trend we see with regard to breweries standing out the need to diversify? Is it going to become something that breweries looking to open, they already need to be planning a seltzer, already need to be planning a kombucha, already need to be planning to barrel age or have some unique ingredient? Is that going to become a criteria that's not just an option, but more so a requirement moving forward?
I'll go first. I'll say, I think if you're thinking about opening up a brewery, you need to take some time and do some more research, especially, COVID has thrown a huge wrench curveball into the normal level of experience in industry and trends that we're used to. So you've got to really hone in onto looking for the details and why one place was successful and how diverse were they, or B, was this one too diverse? Too many, chainsaws in the air trying to juggle, and they just, fell flat on multiple fronts. So I wouldn't say necessarily, open up and try to be everything to everyone. I think you still need to open up. You got to have quality beer. You got to have a good experience, and you've got to have a staff of people that can enhance that. Even from your tasting room person who he or she is 22 years old. This is the first time she's beer tended and poured beers, right? He or she may not be able to bartend and make cocktails and smoked old fashions, but they can pour a beer. So, but they also need to know how to upsell and then how to do things. So, hey, when they're getting ready to pay their tab, did you want to grab a 6-pack or a 4-pack to go? Have you checked out our merch store? We have gift cards and things like that too. So, what Joe mentioned about how they're looking at their business model from so many details and so many different sets of glasses, if you will. If you're not inspecting and really thinking about combing through your business and what you can do better than your competition, then you're just going to settle for equal to your competition. Hopefully, you all get, Andrew's money to come to my bar tonight and to Eric's tomorrow, type of thing. You got to attract new customers and new business every day. If you're not, then you're not growing your brand or your business in general.
We've worked with a lot of breweries of every shape and size, from brand new still in the person's garage breweries to the biggest breweries in the world. And it seems like what I've been able to boil down is the common thing of a lot of people echo that they really started doing well when they stopped paying attention to what their competition was doing and stopped trying to constantly compete with everybody and figure out what they do best and stick to that. And I think that's really what a lot of it I've seen boils down to is what's your vision, what's your mission, and what is it you want to do, and what are your core values. And the breweries that identify that clearly and communicate that and stick to that are some of the ones that do best. These smaller breweries that are kind of fostered by their neighborhood, they do really well. They're not going to be the next Budweiser, but their neighbors, their community keeps them afloat and helps them do really well, and they kind of cater to what the community wants. And I've seen people take those breweries and try and grow them into regionalized breweries and fail, and then I've seen them succeed. But that's kind of what it all boils down to.
And to go back on what Joe said earlier, you have to remain authentic to yourself. You can't try to be something you're not. I think that really echoes what you just put out there, Matt. Now, Tanner, I'd like to kind of follow up with a question for you. You started doing just kombucha. Did you add beer out of necessity, or what made you choose to, add beer to the mix?
Yeah, definitely. We decided to add it because of our location, essentially. Being no other breweries around, the area is just exploding with new houses. And there's obviously nothing else there to go to. There's one hole-in-the-wall dive bar close by and nowhere else to have people go for a drink or anything like that, just to sit down and talk. So, yeah, we wanted to bring people in the tap room. Kombucha isn't going to do that by itself. We do kombucha cocktails and our rattlers and stuff, but that's still not enough. So we brought in beer, and it's been going really well for us.
No, I'm really hoping having beer can be a huge educational opportunity for kombucha. Now, as we hit up at the hour mark, everyone, I want to go around the circle one more time and ask you a question we've ended every Panel Fest conversation with so far. 2020 has been a very weird year. I miss human interaction so much, so I appreciate you five spending a little bit of time with me today. But looking at your year, what has been a bright spot in the year that's been 2020? And Erik, because you're to the right of me now, because Rick decided he wanted to go last. But Erik, we get to start with you. And
I don't know. That's a tough question.
You had a baby this year, because you definitely win.
Yeah. I've just been very thankful to work for a very innovative company who's taken the time. It's somebody that's a company that's been very stable for a long time, who's weathered storms before, and we've been able to take this year and kind of double down on some of the more innovative projects that we hadn't had time to work on before. It's also been a nice refresher to see increased work ethic in a lot of people, and everybody's working like they're not going to have a job tomorrow, and I don't think that's a bad thing whether you're in COVID or not. So productivity, I think, has been a little bit higher, and really taking a look at what profitability means for any product line, any business. Focusing on what you're good at and what your customers want out of you is, I think, a big key takeaway of 2020 that we've seen from every type of business.
I definitely agree to that. Now, Joe, on to you. Positive from the.
So obviously, helping to build this brewery took so much of my time. So that's far less time to worry about COVID, the way of the world, and on a personal note, after 3 delayed wedding dates, I was able to get married in my backyard to my husband. So that was a bright kind of day in this chaos.
Congratulations. That's awesome, man. Tanner, you're up.
Yeah, definitely opening the tap room was a big deal for us. We worked 2.5 years on it. So that was a big milestone. And then in addition to that, found out we're having our second kid on the way. So that's probably a little bit bigger deal.
Congratulations to you as well. And Rick, I guess you get to go maybe not last if Matt shows back up.
Let's see if he pops back in. I'd have to say, I actually had a full-time job prior to the and doing consulting. I did it like consulting part-time, only had like one main client, and I took the plunge. I left that full-time job that I was at for 2 years in March. I was like, I'm going to consult full-time, right? And I had a bunch of I had a lot of good, large breweries. I'd say in the 30 to 40,000 barrel range. A couple of them that were interested in some services and whatnot. But obviously COVID happened, so those got squashed. But I was able to, just through the people that I know and really talking to them, and again, to spend more time and talk with friends, just checking in, seeing how people are doing, been able to have had a couple small projects, but 2 full-time clients, and still, I got a roof over my head. I can still afford to buy a beer, so it's not all bad, and I actually survived. My wife and I survived COVID. We actually got it, so we all said and done, with 2 weeks left in the year, it could have been a lot worse.
And it's going to be a lot better in 2021. So,
2020, it could have been a lot worse.
I'll put it on a t-shirt, Eric, and send it to you. Now, Matt, just because I know you wanted to go last, you didn't want Rick to go last, give us a little positive from your year.
Well, I mean, a typical 2020 presentation here, my computer just decided to restart and do an update right as we're winding down on this thing. So all my screens go blank as I know we're trying to close. So welcome to 2020, I guess. The big takeaway is, for us and a lot of our friends and customers and clients, a lot of people stopped kidding themselves this year. They cut the BS projects that were just emotional. And really, we're not doing anything, dollar-wise or growth-wise for companies. I think it kind of brought everybody down to the same, everyone back down to earth, to the same playing field. Made us all truly, truly appreciate everything that we had, whether that be our families or our businesses, and our clients and customers. So I think it was a great awakening for a lot of people, and kind of almost like I wouldn't say a Control-Alt-Delete, but kind of brought us all to the same playing field and let us grow together from here.
Matt, I think that's a great takeaway. Just the appreciation we've grown just for the simple things in life and the just basic human interaction. I know that's helped me get through the year. And as we hit this hour mark, I want to thank the 5 of you for coming on today just to talk about diversification. And I think it's a trend we're going to see more and more of over the next few years. It'll be really exciting to see what the 5 of you do in the industry and continue to do great things, and what other breweries do in the space. So Erik, Joe, Tanner, Rick, and Matt, thank you so much for joining today. I'm looking forward to that first beer in person, hopefully before too long. And once again, thanks everybody for watching. I'll see everybody soon. Cheers.
Cheers.